Welcome to Fontribute. Oh God, I'm sorry.
Yes.
No. Welcome to. Are we still doing it?
Yes, go. We're live. Go
I'm sorry. Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. That fudged introduction was done by Erin McLaughlin. I think I'll be fired. And with me is Thomas Jockin. Welcome, Thomas.
Hey, everybody.
Sorry.
It's all good. We
Gosh.
figured to give Erin a shot because she's been on for so many episodes to do the intro. It's okay. We'll try it again next week.
Oh God. Okay. We're live. Well, anyway, we'll try to forget that. It's all in the past. Tell us what we're looking at today, Thomas.
You got it. All right. So today I was in charge of picking the fonts, and it was one of our viewers who made a request for checking out weights. And I was reminded of that on this project called Alda, released from Emigre Foundry. It's designed by Burton Hasabe. Excuse me. Pardon me on that. And in my research and remembrance of this project, I remember it was a whole exploration of how weights can be explored in different ways, how each weight of a typeface can express different emotions, feelings, tensions, and as Burton talks about, materiality. In an essay that I'll post up for Fontribute's video, he talked about how he thought of the light as a rubber band, the regular as rubber tubing, and the bold as bent metal or folded metal. So, and especially when I was reviewing this with Erin, we thought the italics were really expressive and conveyed this very different approaches in the weights. So here we are, and we have here on the slide the 3 different weights of Alda.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So since this is a really complex typeface, should we just start by looking at the micro level, started with a letter to begin with?
You got it. All right, let's bounce. So
Cool.
we got the N.
Wow. Yeah, this is insane. So, I mean, usually we're looking at 2 typefaces side by side. Here we've got 3 different weights, and they look like 3 totally different approaches. It's pretty crazy. Tell me what you think when you see your initial thoughts, Tom.
Hey, Erin, just sorry, I know we're live, but just heads up, you broke up almost all of that. Yeah, it's all good. Maybe turn off your camera.
Oh, good God. Okay. Well, you talk while
that's going, I'll roll through the camera. Yeah. So as Erin was saying, these are very different approaches, and I think that's why I wanted to discuss this typeface across the weights. They're not directly one-to-one relatable. You know, for example, take notice this curve profile on the top shoulder, right? These seem to have a similarity, but then over here you have it's it just feels it's just a very different approach. And on the inner counter, same thing. This is much smoother. This one it's half smooth and an abrupt change over here, and here it's just it's all abrupt. So we can see that the approaches are very different across these different weights.
Nice, good point. Yeah, so other than, like you were saying, there's a lot of points, extra points being added, you know, like also, man, the bold especially, like down here, it looks almost like the N is created with like a knotting stroke or something. We've got like a corner down here that's very subtle here in the transitional weight, and then here it's kind of like a totally different feeling. So there's a lot of difference between these, and also check out how long these entry and exit strokes are. Across the weights. Something else that I've noticed looking at these is that the angle, like the angle of the italic changes in the lightweight, it's much more angular than here in the bold. You know, the degree of angle also changes across.
Yes, absolutely. I see. I saw those points as well. Yeah, and just in general, it's just like you can see like this feels like a piece of string or very loose piece of string flowing through. Right, this one's a little more stiff, right, flowing through a little bit more. And this one, again, as you said, it's just super crunchy. And you can see it's just in the profile of the curves, how they're drawn, right? You know, as you point out here, even this like kind of pointy little point terminal up there. Yeah, and also we can just see, again, the discussion of moving across weights. Notice the thick-thin relationships, right? There is contrast between the thin and the thins in the lightweight. but the amount of contrast is significantly less compared to the bold weights.
Yeah, that got really extreme there. That's going to be interesting to see if that's played out across other letters as well.
Awesome. Ready to move on?
Yeah, sure.
The O.
Whoa. They're so different. They're so different. This is, maybe we should have even started with this because the differences between these weights are all so drastic that like this is probably a good way to see them all. So like Thomas was saying on the last slide, we have these extra corners here in the bold weight that aren't present in the regular weight. And there's no corners at all in the lightweight on the interior here. And kind of the same thing on the outside contour. We have kind of a little pointy axis happening here that doesn't quite exist in the other weights. And then as well, you can still kind of see we got the kind of degree of axis there. The angle is a lot more significant in the light. What else do you see? Anything? That's probably it.
Well, I see a couple other things. I mean, again, like the contrast system, you can see even clearer on this one. Right here, across all three, you can see which ones are more high contrast than the other ones, right? Also, you can also see, I see that from the side bearings, right? This is kind of a looser fit versus the tighter fit here, which makes sense, right? As things get bolder, they have to get a tighter letter fit to feel more harmonious, right? And likewise in the counter, they kind of knows how large this counter is versus the size of this counter. This is one of the things we see in bold, right? They have to compensate for the extra weight. So usually as the black increases, the white decreases. So we see that exemplified across these different weights. So even though they're very different approaches formally, right, in terms of each weight increment, there are still Burton is still applying type design principles to harmonize these weights. Basically, if this bold was treated exactly the same level of contrast relationship as the light, it would probably be like here, like the thins would be much thicker, right, and it wouldn't work. It'd be too blobby, as an example.
Excellent. So should we check out the next letter?
Got it.
Cool. Yay. All right. So now we can kind of see how those different shape types kind of come together. So the first thing I'm noticing, again, in the N, we saw that kind of nodding thing where there was a big blocky portion down in that lower corner of the N. And here we kind of have the same, it kind of like pushes outward. It's like a big, I don't know, how do you describe it? It's like a club up at the top of that D. It's pretty interesting how the form just kind of like pushes out of the boundaries there and kind of gets really crunchy, like that materiality that was the point that the designer was trying to make it feel like it's made of a different material. And then also really striking to me again is this contrast, like we saw in the end, the very, very thin stroke down here when it connects back up to the stem in the bold weight. Something else that I think is interesting is the fact that, we added that extra flat segment down here because of this point. The regular and the lightweight, they feel a lot more similar in profile. I would say that, the shapes kind of mimic them between these two weights. But here, the bold, to me, it seems kind of an extra step different in its profile. What are your thoughts about these? What have you noticed?
Yeah, I could see that. I think on I would always see this more as a knot, almost like,
yeah.
right, like almost like it went up there, came up and around, and then came back down, or something like that. But yeah, I feel like this is the interesting moment. The regular, I think, for me, is an interesting movement, right? So I definitely see this curve profile definitely mimics in the regular, right? And I see the introduction of this point up here. It's trying to mimic this. And it's starting to slope it down, kind of how this one tries to slope down. So I see actually in this project, I almost feel like the real tension, or probably in my mind, the problem with this project that Burton had to deal with was how to harmonize this regular weight to not feel too much like the light, like leaning more towards the light, and not too much like the bold in terms of its structure and impressions. And I definitely feel like overall, it seems like I would agree. I think it moves more towards the light in thinking than towards the bold in approach. I would agree with you. At least in this D, I could definitely see that. There's basically the closest I see of a similarity is here, and maybe some things like how this terminal is this handle versus this. But then this top one is feeling much more similar with this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is why I like this project, is I think it's a real, it's not so direct, and it's in movement between the light to the bold, right? And this step, this increment in between, this regular had a, these were all design decisions that Burton had to figure out, and I think that makes it a very interesting project to observe as we're doing this.
Definitely. And also, I mean, again, this is whenever there's an ascender like this, we can really kind of see that angle. Like, even though the features, I feel like how the curves are drawn, I think they're more similar between the light and regular. Check out the angle, like that this D is headed. Like these angles seem more similar, whereas the light, it's like really pushing over to the side. So that's going to be fun to see this in context, to see if we really feel like the light is super slanted. It's kind of fun to see see those different. I wonder why they chose to do that. I don't know. Rubber bands, I guess they're falling over.
Falling over. Very loose sprawl feeling. Yeah, I'm very curious to see how all this comes together in text. Also, one thing to note too, notice negative side bearings. I always watch for that. Right. Yeah. This one has a little bit itsy bitsy. This guy too, itsy bitsy. But obviously, probably the slope is so, because of the extremes of the slope, more likely that this would fall over into a negative side bearing.
Totally. Cool.
All right. Ah, gee.
Yay. Yeah, this was a fun comparison just to see, like, so this is a very different kind of approach for each G. As you can obviously see, viewers, this one's attached here, and this one kind of ends in the same kind of knot sort of club feature that we saw elsewhere. So it's kind of cool to see when the system kind of decides to deviate between the different forms, where it's not trying to mimic the same exact thing. Because if this were connected, you know, it probably would get quite clogged and whatever. So that's kind of a big difference. Do you want to talk about these?
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, it's a lot of things, but we obviously see again, like on the D, right, applied across this top, the brown part of the G, right? It's mimicking, I can see this profile applying out as explored before. So there's similarities in that. Yeah, the connectedness, obviously, the negative side bearing, right, relationships, reviewing that across the styles. The slope also, again, because like this one, what's interesting too is like I always find G's like this very fun. It's kind of like this little wiggle right here. This one's got it too. Even this one has it too, but now it's more like linear. It's much more of like a line pushing in and out like this, versus a little bit of a curve and then very curvature profile over here. Sure, and the feeling of these types. You know, this one's going to feel much more loose and airy. This one's loose and airy. This one's really benting and rigid and crunchy. And this is something in between the two. So that's the impressions I'm getting so far.
Yeah, definitely. It's fun, especially down here, you know, with the bold, like trying to manage the weight. So obviously we have that really thin stroke like we saw before, but seeing down here, I'm just looking at the differences in how kind of weight was handled and where kind of the turn of the pen happens. It's, you know, it is a lot thicker down here, and it's interesting. I wonder what it would have looked like if this stroke had kind of like come a little bit further out like the others. That would have been interesting to see, but this is pretty cool. I don't know what to say. Neat. Let me see. I don't know. What's next?
We got a Y.
Yeah, another descender. I think I chose to include this because, again, like I just couldn't believe how angled this light was. I mean, it's really slanted. This Y is one of the more dramatic Ys I've seen, and you'll also see the W in the text, probably the text sample. But to check how, I mean, it feels like it's blowing in the wind. I just found that so interesting, and to really emphasize how long all of these, you know, inward strokes and serifs were on the light. And the curve of them is pretty cool. I like checking that out, and just look at the difference here. You know, this is so much shorter, so it's neat to see how the profile completely changes in a letter like this. So please.
Yes, I have to fully agree. You know, I also noticed this terminal treatment versus this one, versus like whoop, a little wispy guy over here. Also, think is interesting is seeing how they handled each weight approached this juncture.
Yeah.
Right. Very differently. You know, this one has it kind of really emphasized wide here, and then it just angles define this. Curves handle it. A curve handles it in the regular. And here it's like very, you know, there is a change in weights, but not that much. And so they're still following the same program together, but how they choose to do it is very different. across at their different weights.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see the weight difference between these two sides in the bold. It's just like so extreme. That's pretty interesting. And to note between this and the G that we just saw, how much thinner this is than the G stroke. So like some of those decisions had to be made like when you're looking at letters in context. And I'm sure that the designer tried making this thicker, but this seemed like the right choice. So it's funny how the eye works, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, very true. And I.
Woo!
Oh, some tittles.
Yeah, I just thought let's throw in the tittles here just to look at them up close and kind of see that, like we've been saying, these kind of design decisions are more similar than boink, all of a sudden now we've got a big uh, whatever you would call that shape. Big happy I don't know. What is that called? It looks like a hunk of charcoal or something. I don't know, but it's
Piece of charcoal. Yeah.
yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
and this is just one other example where you can clearly see how the angles work and kind of lengths of serifs. So thank you, for being a good demonstration of this.
Yep. Very much so.
Cool.
Yeah. Also think it's interesting to see like, how, again, size wise, like compare it.
Yeah.
How light that tittle is from the light, right? The regular seems like a reasonable size, Yeah, I feel like basically it's interesting because I feel like one best way to put this. I think the nature of these tittles kind of speak to a different like. I think I have it. I'm gonna look for that in the text settings, see how that affects things. I can't make any direct statements yet about it, but I feel like something seems different between like the relationships here to here versus here to here.
Mm-hmm.
I almost get the feeling like these two are meant to speak together in their tittle relationships, but we'll see.
Maybe like this one's a little high up or something. I don't know. Let's look. Sorry.
Yes. Continue the explorations.
Ooh, fun. Height differences. I don't know. I think and checking out the caps again. All I seem to look at are just the angles where this is going to seem super angled. The text. Oh, I can't wait to see it. What do you think about these height differences? To me, they look kind of like these look very kind of consistent across here, that the same kind of height relationship or the actual literal heights were kept the same, I believe. Is that what that looks like to you?
I think the let's a little bit taller. I think this one's a little taller.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you might be right there.
But it's not significantly different. And I think likewise our X height seemed roughly the same across the board. Yeah, so I think it's yes. So again, like you said, I'm curious. The main emphasizing I see is the sloping is very, that was a little too much. This one is, basically again, like how steep it is in the light, how shallow it is in the bold. I think it's gonna really play out in the texture and color of the type.
Nice. Yay!
Accents. Oh, I love these little accents. This is
I
great.
know. I'm so looking forward to this slide. It's so neat. I mean, they look like little eyelashes or some kind of
like little petals.
They're beautiful. I love the light. And look how different checking out like the question mark, with the little piece here, everything gets very different. I'm not a huge fan of, sorry if you can hear dog noises in the background. This is the one thing I don't understand. The comma and quotation marks here in the bold, I feel like they're flipped. Should have like the part that sticks out should have been on the other side.
On the outside?
I mean? Yeah, like because this follows like the weight is not kind of going out this direction. To me, it seems like they're wrong or something. There's something about it that I don't really like the design.
You're not sold on that.
Or they're too angled or something. But I don't know. We'll see how that looks in context. But
that is interesting.
Anyway, I just jumped right in there, dished out some criticism, but maybe we should talk about other observations. Sorry about that.
Well, like we said, like before, I just want to point out, I always feel like accent characters are one of these secret little moments where if a project's done with love, a designer will really intentionally think about their accents. It's like part of the vocabulary of their project, right? And I really appreciate that in the Alda light is that like this feels like the project, like this whole tone we've been seeing in the whole light exploration. These acutes and gravs really kind of speak to that, that energy and that feeling behind it. So I think I agree that definitely stands out. Even the quotation marks, right? These also again have even when they're meant to be kind of angle, they're a daggy move, they're still very flowy and very coarse, like very kind of swooping through. I really enjoy that. Uh, yeah, the regular I feel like is again that, and like the bold I feel like it has its voice. It has very like a certain kind of beefiness and a certain coarseness that carries through. Like even look at that tilde, like the not the tilde, the yeah, it is the tilde, a tilde. Uh, again, the smoothness in the light versus the beefiness, like angles in the bold, right? And it's something in between in the regular between them.
Yeah, I agree. You really see the character is kind of carried through with these. Although I feel comparatively looking at the length of them and stuff, I feel like the bold ones are a little bit like
Too short.
blunt. They're a little short or something if you just were to compare side by side with what's going on elsewhere. But I mean, it's nice that they, like you said, they all were considered. Even these, like we have that hybrid where there's like a little point here, and that kind of system was kind of brought across. Although the bold, it to me, this is the one point, these little punctuation marks, I feel like it didn't follow this system, whereas elsewhere things actually got a little bit extra complicated with extra angles and extra strokes were added here, but these actually became more simple in design than the previous one. So that's just a tiny little nitpicky thing, but whatever. Might as well mention it.
It's
um,
understandable. I do feel like maybe because the sizing of it, right? Because the text, maybe they just figured overly complicating it wouldn't be would be
yeah,
detrimental.
let's
That'd
see.
be
Look,
my
this is going to be interesting though. Look at the spacing. Like this is going to leave a big white gap, whereas I feel, well, oh golly, Erin, stop eating. Okay, I'll eat my words here and we'll wait till we see it.
we got to see it in text to make your
Gotta see it.
assessment.
Gotta see
But I do like predictions based on incomplete information. I do enjoy that. I like when it works out well.
it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So
What's
let's
next?
one
Oh,
one one last slide with a little hamburger font stuff.
yeah, just to see in context, side by side, what we've got. Let me see if there's anything new we want to talk about while we're looking at them side by side.
Have you
Again,
seen? Yeah.
go ahead.
What were your
I was,
thoughts?
I was going to say, oh, this is a good demonstration to see just how these very thin parts of the A, B, G, what we were looking at before, like how that really affects the contrast, because there's a lot more. My eye is really drawn to those parts here, and it's not, you don't see it consistently in every single character. It didn't get really thin in the T or in the E or anything, so it's kind of like only in very specific characters. So to me, that kind of grabs my eye. I don't know. What are your thoughts about
I
all
don't
of
think
them?
it's that bad. Personally, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's to help. I mean, I think it'd be too blobby. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to read because of the amount of real estate of location. For example, decisions were made like in the E, for example. These are thinner, right? Not the same extent as this, but it's there. The same
Sure,
idea.
sure.
Uh, yes, I think I think it's reason. It's okay for now. I'm curious to see how it looks. I want to see the text settings to make a final decision. I think also for me is actually I think for me stands out as the light, how just airy and kind of like it's such a different voice. It's such a
Hmm.
completely different vision and voice and this kind of like amplitude feeling I'm getting from the bold
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah. God, I love it so much. I love the light. But it is interesting to see these side by side and really, I mean, even with their little, the little drawing details being so completely different, they do kind of feel very similar to me. I mean, I do understand how these are a family, like the overall kind of shape, feel, and pacing, and the comparative widths and stuff. It all seems to kind of work together pretty well. So I'm impressed.
I am too. Actually, honestly, I feel like this is the kind of thing where I would draw the light, I would draw the bold, and then my mind would just spend years just trying to figure out that regular. Like, because it's a tough one because this is not there's no way this could have been done in interpolation, so this was drawn by hand, and as a result you had to manually make the decisions of like what parts to borrow from the bold and what parts to borrow from the light and then
Mhm.
harmonize them together
Yeah,
uh, in the regular. So actually this is why I personally really appreciate this project, for the kind of challenge uh, you have to conceptualize and make this to harmonize these two together as he
sure.
as he attempted in the transition between the two extremes.
Very cool. Well put.
Yeah. And
Yay.
here we are, the text.
Woohoo. Okay. You speak first,
Yes,
please.
certainly. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, my eye immediately goes to a couple of things. One is I don't mind the thinnings in the text and the bold. That's the first thing. Like, I think it needs to have that to be readable at this size. I think it helps clear out the space so that you can feel the momentum and kind of get the impression of the strokes you need to read it. I think it makes sense. In general, I feel like it's a good texture. Like it reads pretty well as a bold in the setting size, and it really plays that really earthy, crunchy feeling about itself across the board. Meanwhile, the light is just this delicate little sunflower. There's just like a little smoothing on water, kind of gliding through because of the low contrast. The degree of sloping, it kind of gives us kind of like momentum with that. And the way these terminals are handled is everything's so wispy and so like seagrass, like grass at the ocean being swayed over to the side. I'm keep using metaphors to explain this. That's my general impression. And then there's regular something in between. It's like it has contrast, but not too much. It's something. Again, like actually in a text setting, I actually feel like it. I'm not sure. There's moments that pull me to feel like it's more related to the light, and there's moments that pull me to it's related to the bold more. So it has like a certain ambiguity, I guess, or just like I'm not the right. Personally, for me, I almost feel like I'd always use the light and the bold. I don't know if I would use the regular. Personally, like I feel like sometimes I get an ambiguity about how to use it or feeling about it. But those are my impressions overall.
Yeah, I see that. How it's kind of like it's not, it doesn't have enough character in and of itself or something. Like it might have been too much of a compromise or something, or I'm not sure. But to me, it's interesting. I love the light, and just seeing, my eye is really drawn actually to these W's because I think they are just they're so curvy. Maybe almost too much, but although it gives it a lot of character, I find it really interesting. But I mean, I just love the light. I'm not as crazy about the bold, to be honest. I think that I'm not like, I think it, I don't know, maybe I'm too critical, I guess. I think there's some weight issues, like the color isn't as even as I was hoping it to be. And I guess what I mean though by that is maybe like, for instance, this A, okay, it kind of looks a little wide to me, and like it is very white here. The counter looks really large, and if I compare it to the S and the E, like those look a little darker to me because they don't have that really thin part. I don't know. There's just some little tiny bits about it where I wish it were a little bit more even or something. And also combinations with the uppercase letters. I feel like those, like these vertical strokes of the H are quite dark, the crossbar. Like, I don't know. There's a couple things I'm feeling a little weird about. Not a big deal, but I also, the numbers and the quotation marks, like I feel there's some things in here that weren't given as much attention as maybe in the lightweight. Like to me, the numbers look a little bit clunkier or something. I think, we have one more slide, and maybe I'm going to be, maybe I'll change my mind. We'll see. Maybe there's some good stuff in there that I can reverse my criticism. I still like it. It has a lot of character, but at this size, I wouldn't use it at this size. I don't know. Sorry, bold. Oh, cool. Ah, look at that light. Oh.
Well, you are sold in that light. I can see definitely you feel very good about that light.
Oh, I do. Okay, I'll be quiet. You want to talk first, or should I spew my...
No, jump in. You have very strong opinions about it, so go in.
I sure do. I don't know. Just everything about this light just feels so intentional. The little apostrophe, or not apostrophe, comma. Oh Lord, Erin. The ampersand. The numbers look great. That's where I think when I was putting this slide together, when I was looking at kind of how the numbers were designed and like this ampersand, I'm like, I can tell it doesn't feel like these details were as well resolved, I think, in the bold. That's how I feel anyway. Like the 5 doesn't feel like the weight was maybe as carefully designed as it was in some of the other letters, I would say. It looks great at this size. I mean, in terms of, getting that crunchy feeling and stuff, I do like that. But if I had to make really tiny, tiny little comments, it would probably be about the combinations of maybe the uppercase letters being maybe slightly heavy, or maybe it's just because the uppercase letters typically don't have as many in Latin script. They don't have as many ins and outs and curves, so there's not as many opportunities to put some of these, like zigzags and details and crimps in them. Maybe that's my issue. Yeah, Erin, take back your criticism.
Maybe, but I feel like that would maybe. But you feel like they are resolved in the lightweight though, correct?
Yeah, I feel they look really good in the light. I would say so. I don't know. But I made a typeface kind of like this once, that had a lot of um different, junctions and different angles and blah blah blah, all that stuff happening in the lowercase. But I realized in that process that uppercase letters are just a lot more straightforward in terms of, oh, there's a vertical, oh, there's one curve. Whereas, you get a where you have many opportunities to do something funky. So anyway, it's a little harder, I think, to make uppercase letters look unique. Um, well, I'm going to eat my words. Just, oh God. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Well,
You
let's see.
take over.
Here's what I will agree with you on. I do agree
Okay.
that the numbers in this bold are not as resolved, right? I think their weight distribution's a little weird, right? Especially in this 5 per se. Yeah, I agree. Even with the 9 and the 7, yeah, there's a certain. And again, I think that quote, the comma is again like it's actually showing here. It's like sloped too much, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, it just feels too like it feels like it's sloped too much per se, and its length's not as dramatic or effective or dramatic enough. So yeah, I could see your comments about that. Uh, yeah, and actually, personally, in bolds, I from your other slide, I could see your points of how this counter size, right, is having some issues when you compare that to the counter issues in the S, for example, or the E, right, next to it. I could see your points about just tensions in the project and the bold is not resolved uh, fully effectively from a spacing point of view.
And by the way, note, this is me being like, this is like my ultimate criticism. This isn't like, I mean, I just feel really bad because this is obviously a fantastic project. It's fantastic. I love it. It's great. I'm just being like, if this were going to be the absolute ideal typeface in the history of the world in my brain, then these are the things I would change. I just want to put a disclaimer in there. It's a fantastic project. Okay, done.
Yes,
Great.
for its pro. I mean, no, I mean, actually, I mean, again, I think actually being realistic is, if I was working on this project, probably in my mind, at a certain point, I'd probably have a mental priority, right? Where there's a certain project that I have a certain mental affinity, probably this one, and
Hmm.
like the other projects would not just get the same kind of the mental fortitude in thinking all the way through. Uh, so I'm not surprised that there's a certain mental gap or just like incompletion on one side of the family, right? Or things for improvement. Well, another area we find is very effective and hits all the notes it's trying to hit really well.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't find that very surprising very much. I don't think it actually diminishes the project at all. It's just, again, when you're dealing with actually a very challenging brief like this,
Hmm.
where the weight is just dramatically, the design is changing so radically across weight. I think that's a very tough mental conception. You have to think through. And I think considering that Burton is like this is a graduate project, by the way. This was his project at, I believe, the Royal Academy. It's a very accomplished project to be so ambitious and to succeed as well as he did,
Yeah,
considering when he produced the
definitely.
work.
Definitely. Yes. Amazing. Kudos. Kudos to you. Whew.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So, Aaron, what are your end impressions at the end of this exploration?
I mean, it's such a fantastic idea. I love it. And then, there are really beautiful forms in each one of these weights. It's very interesting. And I wonder if people this is the italic, so there were even more differences in the italic than there were in the upright version of this. This typeface has the same kind of concept in the upright, which is a little bit more subtle, but the italic, I think, is where the designer really wanted to push the limits. So I think that might be another reason why I'm seeing some like really dramatic things happening in this, is that maybe in the regular upright weight it's a little more subtle. But it would be very cool to see someone use this, if in see how someone uses this family. Do they use them all together? Do people use them just one at a time? I don't know, but it's a great sort of I don't know, great challenge, and it worked well. I think it overall this is a really cool project. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I think overall the kind of attachment of certain physical attributes to weights makes sense, right? We expect lights to be very smooth and very light and airy. We expect bold to be feeling very coarse and very crunchy, and regulars to be something in between the two of those extremes. So as a proof of concept for that, I think it's very successful. And I think the decisions of like more extreme sloping in the light and more shallow sloping in the bold, again, likewise makes sense. I think this is a project that's very successful in its extremes. And while there are some formal issues, I think overall, yes, I definitely I think it's a typeface that in an odd way, its differences harmonize together to be effective as a family. So as a typeface project, I think it's very successful in that light. And I hope a lot of designers tap this typeface to use in multiple sizes or scales or proportions, where things like that airiness of light or the crunchiness of a bold would be really useful in editorial projects, for example. In branding, I think it would be very useful to use italics like this. So yeah, I think that's my overall impression of it.
Great point. I have to say one more thing to make this video super long. But yeah, it's neat because I know I was reading about it. You know, if you use this in a small size, you might not notice those differences. But it's kind of like if you bought this, it's like getting some different display, or at least the light and the bold, two different weights of display typeface as well. Because they're just so beautiful at that large size. I mean, it's quite a cool deal. So anyway, check it out from Emigre. And for rent from Font Stand, our fun friends. Anyway, thank you. You want to do the outro?
Here, I'll close it out. So yeah. This has been Thomas
and Erin,
and this has been Fontribute. So hope you all enjoyed it. Looking forward to hearing your comments. This episode was from a viewer's request. And if you have any things you'd like to particularly for us to talk about and explore, let us know. And we are listening, and we love hearing feedback from our audience online. So hope you all have a great week. And Erin, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you. All right. Bye.